It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson.
Welcome to another episode of a special Pure Performance. I'm not sure if it's a regular Pure Performance or Pure Performance Cafe. We have the cafes which are kind of like more technical focused with the engineering team, and I have a mixture sitting here. Well, I have engineers sitting here. But I actually start on my left. Sonja.
Hi, Andy.
Hi. I think we had the opportunity in the past.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
On different topic.
Different topic, yeah. Maybe you want to quickly introduce yourself?
I'm a technical product manager at Dynatrace. I have been working at Dynatrace for 4 or 5 years. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And now my main topic is distributed tracing and observability.
Cool. So obviously these are the topics that will be relevant for today's talk. Because we're going to talk about all the things that are happening in the community around OpenTracing, OpenTelemetry, OpenCensus, and all these terminologies.
Lots of things happening. It's a really dynamic environment right now.
Yeah, and you are on the product management side in Dynatrace, meaning trying to figure out how Dynatrace can contribute to that OpenTracing community or to that distributed tracing community.
Exactly, how we can help with the project to make also sure that they fit for us once we want to integrate and support them within Dynatrace for our customers' use case.
Very cool. And then on the other side, a little further to the right from my perspective, sits, who is that?
Hi, I'm Daniel.
Hi, Daniel. So Daniel, maybe a quick introduction for you as well, for people that don't know you yet?
Yeah, I'm lead technology strategist at Dynatrace, also quite the same time at Dynatrace as Sonja is. And I'm responsible for everything open source, what we do as Dynatrace, and also I'm on the W3C working group for TraceContext and also participating in a few projects, open source projects, and more or less I'm responsible for our community efforts. So how are we doing open source? And this also involves, of course, the open observability space.
Perfect. So that means on the one side we have the product team, implementing things in the product that will obviously help our customers. On the other side, Daniel, the connection to the larger open source community and really driving also the efforts around open tracing or traceability. So for me as a, let's say, developer, architect, if I want to start with a new project in the cloud native space, I am overwhelmed with a lot of terminology that is floating around, and I think I want to get started with maybe level setting or explaining everyone what all the terminologies that is floating around that I have to be aware of. So for me, Sonja, you said earlier distributed tracing, right? I think distributed tracing should be clear, but for those where it's not clear, can you give us a little overview, because you're also the PM for distributed tracing. What does this really mean?
So distributed tracing is about connecting all your services together to be able to have one end-to-end view on what's happening with one request. One request typically you start in the browser or in a mobile app, and then you have the click that goes to the first server or maybe to a web server, and then to a services and another services, and in microservices environment you have for one request a high number of services that are included. In the past it was more interconnected, so you had one monolithic and the requests weren't that big. So we were just within one big component. And now with microservices, one request can go to a high number of services, and people, especially even troubleshooting, debugging, looking at the environment, are really confused. Where did my request went? Where does the error come from? And distributed tracing is the tool that helps us, architects, developers, to understand how services are connected, which one was included in my request, how long did it take in each services, and to be able to do some meaningful analysis.
And is distributed tracing something completely new that just came up in the last year or two?
No, actually it's been around for like the last 10 or 15 years. Actually at Dynatrace we have a patent on it, and I think it was started, it's already Alois tweeted that some times ago on Twitter. So it was 2 years before the Dapper paper from Google. So it's another reference in the distributed tracing world. So it's like the last decade, we have been doing distributed tracing, but now it's really more focused and visible due to the microservices issue. Before developer, they would just develop their code in the monolith application, but now with multiple microservices, debugging within the process is not enough. They need to have a view across services, and that's why recently it has become more popular.
Cool, but it's been around for a while, so it's nothing new. We've been doing it for probably 15 years now since we've been around.
Yeah.
And
the new thing are the standardizations effort that's going on. For example, with the W3C working group Daniel is working on.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good segue over. So distributed tracing is the overarching term. Now there's a lot of different standards around. I mean, I'm just, OpenCensus, OpenTracing, OpenTelemetry, TraceContext. There's a lot of terminology that is floating around when I do my research. Can you maybe give us a little background in what all these terms are and what's really relevant now?
Yeah, that's actually a huge question. If we start with TraceContext, so if we, as Sonja said before, want to trace transactions end to end, we need a way to pass some ID, some transaction ID between all those tiers. Until now, each vendor, each project had their own way of passing this ID. Mostly it was a header, but it was not clear which header this should be. And WCC TraceContext establishes a dedicated header format for passing on tracing information between different tiers, which means that also, first of all, one good thing is that we can hope that infrastructure provider like cloud providers or proxies or firewalls will then not remove this header when it passes through them. So the hope is that when there is a standard, this header will be passed on between tiers. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this header has a second field that will also contain some information about who participated in this trace, and that is also valuable information when it's about interoperability between tools. So maybe, so here is Dynatrace, that was something in Azure, and here's Dynatrace again, and you can then maybe use the same trace ID to look up the same trace in Azure, so you get more or less, you can merge different traces from different vendors. That's one thing. The other things you mentioned are different projects. These are not standards. These are basically projects that deal or try to solve the problem of tracing application or like instrumenting applications so that they collect traces, so that they pass on this header, because this comes not for free, of course. You have to instrument your code somehow. And OpenTelemetry, OpenCensus is a project by Google. They have their solution. Then there is OpenTracing. That's a project by Lightstep, but it's a CNCF project.
So CNCF Cloud Native Foundation.
Yeah, it's a Cloud Native Foundation project. And those two projects now merged to one, or are merging to one project that's called OpenTelemetry.
Okay.
And this should be then best of both worlds, basically. So that's the whole idea of that.
Yeah. So if I kind of sum it up, the TraceContext is kind of a definition how to pass trace information from one tier to another, and kind of what information is passed. Solving some of the issues that we as a vendor have been facing, that our trace context that we used an HTTP header. It has been constantly removed by tools like proxies, and so we had to go in and configure it. So now the belief is, or the hope is, once this is a standard, then the firewalls, the proxies, all these things in the middle will pass it along. Plus, if the cloud vendors and maybe other vendors are also sending this information along, then it will be easier to do end-to-end tracing, even though you may not have your, let's say, monitoring tool installed on every tier. Right?
Yeah, so for our users, The first thing is really making sure you get the end-to-end transaction, no broken transaction, no broken traces, because of a middleware component that we just dropped the header.
Yeah.
And that's why we started working on that project to push for a standard to enable us to really assure end-to-end transaction, no more broken.
And we are
traces.
not only working on this project, actually Alois is from Dynatrace is chairing the project, so Alois is chair of this WCC project, so it's in our full interest to have that. And as far as I know, Sonja already has something in the product already as well.
Yeah, so we have it
that.
already running as a preview in the project. In the product, so you can register on the website, and we enable a feature flag for you. You can add those headers additionally, and meaning if you have a services running in the cloud with Azure is implementing it, you already have some success where you get an end-to-end where the trace don't break anymore because this header is being passed on.
That's pretty cool. And so now this is TraceContext. Makes sense.
Maybe one more thing. It's really our early standard, so we know that Microsoft, Google, and other will implement it. So right now the number of use cases that we serve with that are not that huge. But in the future, as cloud providers and additional components will implement this new standard, then we will have solved this problem for our customers.
Cool.
So we are ready and waiting for the cloud.
And we can also post, so you said people can register, at least the Dynatrace users can register for an early access program. So that's, I guess, on our regular early access program page, they can find it. That's awesome. And I think you also wrote a blog post about it, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's comes with a nice blog post and some examples.
Perfect. So now this is TraceContext. But the real problem that we obviously have to solve is how do we instrument applications that we can actually get details about the transaction that is flowing through a microservice or even through a monolith. And this is now, Daniel, if I'm hearing this correctly, this is what OpenTelemetry, kind of the combination of OpenCensus and OpenTracing, tries to solve. How do we instrument applications, and I would assume with the in the most convenient way for developers or framework like framework vendors, right? Is this the kind of the idea of OpenTelemetry?
Of course. I mean, to be honest, I have to say that, of course, in the most convenient way, you just install maybe Dynatrace, and it will do all that. So that's basically a solved problem. We put a lot of effort into instrumentation, creating those agents. Yet there are use cases where you maybe are not able to get into some platform with an agent. Or also from a vendor perspective, you cannot always support each and every technology, and maybe there is no dedicated instrumentation for a given platform, technology, whatever. And in such cases, of course, a community sponsored project can, of course, help a lot. Yeah, and also a standard around that. So for us, and that's also the reason why we are really actively participating in OpenTelemetry, is for us it's fine. We don't care so much about where the data is coming from, because we want. So if open source tracing solutions create high quality data, even better for us, because our value prop is around what to do with this data. How to analyze it, display it, artificial intelligence, the whole backend that you need. You have to store it somewhere. So that's our value prop, and as such, we hope even that at some point the open source tracing solutions will be so good that we can just plug and play them, or plug them in instead of a Dynatrace agent, and it will produce data that is as good as our agents produce. And this is what we are actively working on as Dynatrace.
So now, what type of data are we talking about? On the one side, one of the key aspects is obviously the trace context passing data along, but that's not really the main data, right? Is this like metrics? Is it trace data, additional trace data, like what we call the pure path? Is it method execution times? What are you guys working on right now as part of OpenTelemetry? What type of data can be exposed?
First of all, OpenTelemetry will be traces metrics, and logs.
Okay.
So it will be all of that. Our focus right now is on traces. What is a trace? A transaction consists of a trace, so that's the end-to-end thing that has one ID. And every sub operation, be it between tiers, be it within an application, is called span.
Okay.
So a trace is more or less the let's put it like, you can say it's the root. And on such a trace you have a lot of spans, like a tree of spans that is below that. And this is what we are, that very much resembles the pure path that we have as Dynatrace. So it's not of, and that's also a good thing, because it's always the same structure you end up with. It's always some kind of tree structure. We have pretty much the same tree structure, and our focus is now getting those traces out of those different platforms. Yeah.
Pretty cool. And that means, how do we, so as a developer, like if I would use any of the libraries that will come up, right? I mean, obviously with the APM vendors like Dynatrace, the idea is you just install the agent and that's taken care of. But there will be other projects, I would assume some libraries, like I think we have an SDK, right, where you can also instrument your applications.
Exactly, it will be very similar to our SDK. In fact, we are trying to push some of the aspects of our own SDK, some of the learning we had, about data quality, about how the interface looks like. We are trying to inject some of those thoughts coming from the enterprise world, scaling and what needs to be done to be run in production in large environments, all the supportability and all these small, tiny bytes we are trying to inject into the OpenTelemetry project, working on it with the community to make sure we will also be able to get some value from those data. And as for the use case there, I see two main use cases. The first is frameworks or component, who has the best knowledge to instrument a framework or a third-party component? Is it we at Dynatrace, or is it the frameworks developers? I would argue that the frameworks developers should be the best. They know the code, they know where are the boundaries to the service, so they should be, in the end, the one that will be able to do the best instrumentation. Right now, we are taking care of that, and it's always taking us a lot of resource and testing, then a version change, and then something in the library change, and we have to update our instrumentation. So the vision and the hope for us as Dynatrace with OpenTelemetry is that frameworks will have instrumentation, will come instrumented with an additional library, and we'll be able to build on that. Not having all the resources in R&D to do the instrumentation by ourselves, but really being able to reuse the framework instrumentation. And that will allow us a quicker time to market, because doing it for us at the R&D, we have to decide which one we want to do, where do we want to put our resource, and if it comes already built in, then we will be able to quicker display it and have it in Dynatrace.
I mean, for me, the great benefit is obviously for the framework developers, because they can put in instrumentation once, and then they are ensured that whatever monitoring tool the customers will use, assuming they adhere to the OpenTelemetry standard, they can consume the same data that they have put in into the framework, right? I think that's perfect.
And that's about traces, but I said that's also about metrics and about logs. And so that's one use case. And the second use case we see for our users, sometimes some custom instrumentation code is needed. Like for business value, you want to put a business tag on one transaction to do further analytics. That stuff we cannot do automatically with Dynatrace. So customers have to use the SDK, right now one agent SDK, but they will always come up and some customer might say, but that's vendor code. So what if in 1-2 years I want to switch vendor, then it's not vendor neutral. And that's why for us it also makes sense to add this possibility to have a vendor neutral SDK.
So I think it's a big thing, right? Because we see it always with our enterprise customers, after a couple of years, they typically have contracts with vendors, and after a couple of years they may change. And then if you are ensured that the instrumentation that you have will also work with the new vendor, then it's much easier to switch, which means vendors need to much better differentiate the value prop. And I think that's what you said, Daniel. We need to differentiate not in the way we instrument, because instrumentation is a solved problem and it's basically a commodity, right? And it's a standard, but we need to differentiate as monitoring vendors on what we do with the data, right? I think that's... That's a really cool thing. Okay, so if I kind of recap again, just to make sure that everybody understands. We started with distributed tracing in the beginning. We understand that what we want to really do is end-to-end tracing with information on what happens on each individual tier. We want to make sure that things are passed along each individual tier. That's why we have TraceContext, which defines a standard. And the hope here is that every tool is producing the same type of data, and that cloud vendors, network component vendors are simply passing this along and not throwing it away, making it hard to actually get the end-to-end trace. Then we had two projects, one from Google and one from, what was the other one? Lightstep, right? OpenCensus and OpenTracing, and they now merged into OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry basically tries to figure out or specify standards for traces, for metrics, and for logs. So that if I'm a user or if I'm building applications or frameworks, I can basically pick whatever library I want to instrument my app, and I'm ensured that wherever my app or my framework gets deployed, if they have a monitoring tool that can ingest the data, that I'm safe basically. That's the idea. I like your two use cases that you explained. That's pretty cool. So what does this mean then? When I am, it's at the time of the recording, it's July. I'm not sure exactly when this airs, but probably in the next couple of weeks. So let's assume 2019 in the fall, I start a new project. What do I, as an architect, as a developer, as an operations team, need to take care of? Should I insist that the platform that I'm choosing is part of OpenTelemetry, that my frameworks adhere to that, or what are the things I need to take care of so that I don't, let's say, go off in the wrong direction? I know
that's a pretty hard question, but depends on very much what you want to do. I don't see like using open source tracing. Might be an option to get started, but you always have to take care of that. You have to do something with the data. So you have to. Besides that in fall, OpenTelemetry will not be ready. Okay. So it will take. I'm pretty sure until end of year, until this matures out. It really depends on if you want to use open source. Okay, you can start with that and you can instrument that, but also means that you of course put actual like instrumentation code most probably into your application. So it means you have like some kind of login produced, and you will build some kind of infrastructure where you store all this stuff. And so this is, if you want to go this route, that's fine. And
also for experimenting, people understand the concept behind that better when they're doing hands-off, Dynatrace do it automatically for you, but sometimes people need to understand, and that's a great way to get started and understand what's going on.
And as you said, you're starting a project, right? So it's fine to maybe start out with whatever. Actually, then you will still have to choose between OpenCensus and OpenTracing, and then I would go with the platform that has the project that has the better support for the technologies you're using, because they differ depending on if you're on Java or Node or .NET. So they have a different breadth of what they do and what they auto-instrument, because that's also a thing. You don't want to instrument each and everything on your own. Yeah. You want to have some auto-instrumentation. This really depends. There are different breadth of coverage here. That's the first thing I would say you have to take care of. And then you can start experimenting with that. If you are like today, if you are working on some enterprise product, and that's not, and I'm not saying Dynatrace now, if you're working on an enterprise product as of today, I would go for a vendor, to be honest, because you need the support, you need some backend, you need the analytics. So if your time to market is like in the next few months, I would not go open source only. There is just not enough tooling available, like backends, like analytics platforms, etc.
And also you have to think about the total cost of ownership.
Yeah.
You know, right now when you start and to play, it's really nice, but then once you develop to production, you have to think about other stuff like which value do you get out of it? So right now the open source tools are really limited to a list of traces, and good luck finding one trace you need for debugging in a million traces. And also then you might lack some data quality to really figure out what the issue was, and then about maintaining, and then you have to scale your systems, and there's a lot of consideration you have to think of, which in the end might be more effort and more resources. And as an application developer, you want to focus on the core business. You know, you want to be writing code that brings value to the business. You don't want to build your own monitoring platform, and that's a little bit the risk with the open source tools. Now, back to your question, I think that's for application user. They should stick to something that does it automatically, no complexity, enable us to do business value. On the other side, the question that's really relevant is for framework and component provider. Because if you have a framework or a library, you know, or a component like, let's think about stuff like Envoy. You know, Envoy is a proxy, native. We cannot do automatic instrumentation, and it has OpenTracing built in.
That's
and
cool.
I think that's a really smart move from there. And we are looking at implementing it and adding those traces to our own PurePath. And that really makes sense because it's native, so we couldn't do automatic instrumentation. But because they have built in OpenTracing support in such a nice way, we will be able to do automatic injection and to retrieve the data out of it. And I've just seen this morning, a tweet from Linkerd asking users for feedback on what they should build in direction distributed tracing. So if you are a framework provider or component provider, library, that's the moment where you should think, okay, which value do I want to bring to my user? How do I want to enable them to not only debug and monitor my component, but make sure I provide value along the distributed tracing, along the end-to-end tracing. Because most of the time it's not only about that component, but making sure it plays nice with the other and we can integrate it. And for this framework and components, then I think it's really important to start looking at OpenTelemetry now and TraceContext. So that's the two things that are really important.
So who is part of OpenTelemetry? Like what companies, what bodies are part of it? I mean, I assume the list is long, but who are they? I mean, I would assume all the big cloud vendors.
Microsoft, Google is in there. Uber is participating because they have Jaeger tracing. A lot of different also people that are rather on the vendor side. Netflix is working, participating. So a lot of different companies that are either vendors or cloud providers or have really large deployments of some technology they want to monitor properly.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason I'm asking this because this actually shows the commitment, and I think also the future proof.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, that's what it is. It's the way forward, right? I mean, it's OpenTelemetry.
Yeah, well, we had a kind of a separation when there was still OpenCensus and OpenTracing, also separations of different philosophies how to do it. And now, this is a really joint effort of a lot of different groups, vendors, and cloud providers, and we can expect that this is the way going forward. Yeah, definitely.
Pretty cool.
We are also contributing to OpenTelemetry, so we are part of the project.
Exactly.
And we are in the, Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Java, in the Python, in the Node.js, in the .NET groups.
And in the specification.
And in the specification.
That's pretty cool. So to kind of sum it up, I mean, I know I summed up a lot of things earlier already, but I want to just highlight some of the other things I just learned at the end. If I'm a framework developer, if I'm a cloud vendor, if I'm a component developer, right now is a good time to look into OpenTelemetry, because if I put this in, the trace context and everything else, I'm future-proof, and I know that the next generation of my frameworks will have a better chance to be correctly monitored and contribute to a real good end-to-end trace. I think that's a great way. If people just want to play around with it right now, OpenTelemetry is not yet there. So that means right now you can still look into Census and OpenTracing. Daniel, I think you said end of the year is probably a good time frame for OpenTelemetry, or maybe early next year.
now it's a good time to look at OpenTelemetry from a spec perspective, see how things are implemented, contribute maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's good, yeah.
Makes sense if you see that something is missing. So it's now good. There are a lot of issues up for grabs at those different projects. So if you want to participate in open source, go ahead. But yeah, until end of year, there will be, I expect nothing to be there, and also no backend to be available to actually digest this data. I think I have to emphasize that again. This OpenTelemetry will just collect the data and will send it to somewhere. This somewhere has to exist, of course, and this somewhere will be also Dynatrace at some point, But with OpenTelemetry alone, you just get protobufs or data. JSONs or whatever.
Understood,
so,
yeah.
And that's really also important.
Yeah, and I think that's also to kind of echo your point again from earlier. It's great that we have it. That means we will make it very easy to instrument frameworks and applications. But the key and the value prop, the differentiator of like vendors like us is going to be what we can do with the data.
Exactly.
Right? And that's the clear message. Yeah. And I hope I don't step on anybody's toes here now, but that actually means the agent technology itself is becoming less, obviously, of a differentiator. I mean, there's still obviously value because it's the auto instrumentation, but the real value differentiator and the value prop is going to be what to do with the data.
Yeah, I mean, the depth of the data is still, and this will take a long time until that is the open source can match that. That's also a technology topic because. Just as an example, we run very often native on platforms and collect also native metrics that are not available to some like Node.js. If you think Node.js, if you don't run on a native module, you get some data not out of it, and also some kind of stack traces and all of that. So that it will take its time until they are those projects are that far. We are working on getting them there, of course. So I think that the agent development, like we are talking about now 3-4 years, that those technologies will have the same low overhead, the same breadth of data. That will take a few years still.
And actually I'm starting a blog post series to highlight what are those technical challenges. To really make it visible what are the stuff we want to work on, which are the features we are pushing for in OpenTelemetry, to make sure that all the use cases we have for large enterprise production ready customers are fit in OpenTelemetry. Quality of data, supportability, and all those topics that might be overseen when people work in development on small projects, but that are real issues for us.
Very cool. All right. Any last words? No? All good? We will definitely make sure on the proceedings of the podcast we link to your blog posts, and also for Dynatrace users to find the Early Access program. I think that will be good. And I think we should probably do another podcast at the end of the year to see what the status is and where we are. Yeah,
maybe around or after KubeCon.
Yeah,
KubeCon is in November. Yeah. There are will be a few news and around OpenTelemetry definitely, and after that we should talk again, I guess.
Yeah. But I think it was really great as an overview and also kind of explaining the different terminology, the history. OpenTelemetry is the future. I think that's important to understand, right? Great to look into it right now if you want to contribute to the spec and want to use it. And if you are a user, that means if you're writing apps that you want to monitor, it will take a little while longer until it's ready, but you can already look into what's available right now, OpenCensus, OpenTracing, and obviously the vendors. We all have good solutions that makes it easy to instrument and trace and analyze data. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.